They called me the nail girl. Not Athena, not honey, just the nail girl. Like my entire existence could be summed up by the faint scent of acetone that, according to my family, clung to me like a second skin. It didn't matter that I was 28 years old and had built something from nothing. To the Martin and Ortiz clans, I was just the cousin who chose to paint toes instead of getting a real degree. Every family gathering was the same. The annual summer barbecue, Christmas dinner, even Aunt Sophia's last big birthday bash. My cousins, Sadie, Mia and Jacqueline, would circle like vultures, their voices dripping with feigned concern. Sadie, a year older than me at 29, always led the charge. "Still doing nails, babe?" she'd ask, her eyes scanning my outfit for any sign of my supposed blue-collar poverty. "I mean, it's great you're so hands-on, but, you'll never land a man with that kind of lifestyle. Corporate types want someone who can host a dinner party, not someone who smells like a salon." Mia, 27, would chime in, pretending to be scrolling on her phone. "Yeah, like, my boyfriend's a doctor. He just wouldn't get it, all that manual labour." Mia was always trying to convince everyone she was an influencer, posting filtered photos of her lavish life, even though I knew from my older sister Charlotte that Mia was secretly drowning in credit card debt. Charlotte, 35, my only sibling, was always supportive but tended to avoid the family drama, which meant I often faced the cousins alone. Then there was Jacqueline, the eldest at 30, already married to James, a junior attorney she insisted was a partner at his firm. "Remember when I told you to go to law school, Athena? You could have been somebody. Instead, you chose this." She'd gesture vaguely, as if the air around me was tainted. While they were flaunting their law school applications, their doctor boyfriends, and the Vera Wang dresses they were considering for their hypothetical weddings, I was just me, the one who got side-eyed for having calloused hands and a practical handbag instead of a designer one. They never asked about my days, never inquired about my clients, never even bothered to wonder if there was more to my story than what they saw on the surface. They'd already decided I was the underachiever, the one who would never marry out of her station. What they didn't know, or frankly didn't care to ask, was that the nail girl had 6 high-end nail salons across Southern California. 6, each one catering to an elite clientele from Beverly Hills to Laguna Beach. I didn't just paint toes, I owned the entire operation. My first salon, a tiny space I bought with a small business grant and every penny I'd saved since I was 16, had blossomed into an empire. I'd built it from the ground up, waking up at 5 a.m., working until midnight, handling everything from inventory to hostile clients. And even more secretly, for the past 2 years, the nail girl had been in a committed relationship with Lucas Holland. Yes, that Holland. The youngest heir to the prestigious Holland Hotels empire. He was 30, quiet, respectful, and incredibly supportive. He knew about my family's snobbery, about their constant belittling. He'd seen the texts, heard the voicemails, but he'd never met them. I'd always found an excuse, a way to keep my 2 worlds separate. It wasn't because I was ashamed of him, it was because I was tired of their judgment. I didn't want their toxic energy anywhere near him. Now, the annual family reunion was looming again. This year, it was at Aunt Sophia's sprawling estate in Malibu, where the air was thick with judgment and the scent of money. Sophia, my aunt, currently 50 years old and the main gatekeeper of family approval, had already sent out the passive-aggressive email about proper attire and family values. I could already feel the familiar dread settling in, the anticipation of another round of thinly veiled insults and condescending pity. I was just locking up my flagship salon on Rodeo Drive. Yeah, that Rodeo Drive. The soft hum of the ventilation system winding down around me. The last client had left an hour ago, and the place was spotless, gleaming under the recessed lights. My phone buzzed in my hand, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Lucas. I unlocked it, a small smile playing on my lips. His texts were usually straightforward, planning our next dinner or weekend getaway. But this one made my heart do a little flip. I was thinking, what if I propose next weekend? The reunion day dawned, bright and deceptively innocent. It was a perfect Southern California summer morning, the kind that made you forget all your problems, unless your problems wore designer sunglasses and judged you for a living. Aunt Sophia's sprawling estate in Malibu was already buzzing when I pulled up, the valet parking a line of luxury cars that made my own understated Range Rover feel almost humble. Almost. I stepped out, adjusting the drape of my dress. It was a simple, elegant silk midi, a rich sapphire blue paired with nude heels. No obvious logos, nothing flashy, but the kind of fabric that whispered expensive rather than screaming it. I'd learned long ago that with my family, subtlety was key. Too much, and I was trying too hard, too little, and I was proving their point. The moment I walked through the arched entryway into the manicured backyard, the familiar radar went off. My cousins, like a well-oiled, judgmental machine, spotted me instantly. Sadie, 29, was already holding court by the mimosa bar, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. Mia, 27, was posing for a selfie by the infinity pool, her phone held at a flattering angle. Jacqueline, 30, was near the buffet table, meticulously arranging a plate of fruit. Sadie was the first to swoop in, her smile a little too wide, a little too bright. "Athena, there you are. We were just talking about you." Her eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over my outfit. "Still painting toes, babe? Or did you finally find a nice little salon to manage?" Mia, ever the echo, giggled. "Yeah, I mean, it's so you to be so hands-on. But seriously, any man in your life, or are you still single, babe?" She made babe sound like a condescending pity pat. Jacqueline, joining them, added her 2 cents. "It's just, you're 28 now, Athena. Time's ticking. You really should be thinking about settling down. James and I have been married for 5 years already. You know, a stable, corporate man. Someone who can provide." She patted her husband James's arm, who offered a weak, distracted smile while checking his watch. James, a junior attorney, always looked like he was about to collapse from exhaustion. I just smiled, a calm, almost serene smile that I'd perfected over years of enduring their barbs. "Oh, you know me," I said, my voice light. "Always busy, always working." I took a mimosa from a passing waiter, taking a slow sip. And no, I didn't bring anyone today, just me. It was technically true for now. Lucas was set to arrive later, a flight delay being our agreed-upon cover story. It gave me a few hours to brace myself and them a few hours to get comfortable in their assumptions. Inside, though, my stomach did a little flip every time my phone buzzed. Was it him? Was he on his way? I tried to play it cool, engaging in polite, superficial conversations with aunts and uncles who asked about my little business with the same tone they'd use for a child's lemonade stand. My sister, Charlotte, 35, found me by the rose garden, offering a genuine, warm smile. "You look great, Athena," she whispered, her eyes sympathetic. She knew the drill. She knew how these things went. "Thanks, you too," I replied, appreciating her quiet support. She was the only one in the family who truly saw me, even if she rarely intervened in the cousins' antics. The afternoon wore on, a predictable cycle of small talk, forced laughter, and the clinking of glasses. I watched Sadie, Mia, and Jacqueline, who were now huddled together, whispering and occasionally glancing my way. They looked smug, triumphant, as if they'd just won some invisible competition. I knew that look. It usually meant they had some big news to drop, something designed to make me feel even smaller. Suddenly, Sadie clinked her glass with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention. Her fiancé, Chase Howard, a man I'd only met briefly at a previous gathering, stood awkwardly beside her, a forced smile plastered on his face. He looked vaguely uncomfortable in his suit, like he'd borrowed it for the occasion. "Excuse me, everyone," Sadie practically shouted, her voice laced with a triumphant glee. "I have some exciting news." A hush fell over the crowd. Aunt Sophia beamed, already knowing what was coming. Sadie held up her left hand, a diamond glinting on her ring finger. It was substantial, flashy, exactly what I'd expect her to choose. "Chase and I are officially engaged," she announced, her voice practically vibrating with smug satisfaction. "We're so thrilled, and I just have to say," she paused, her eyes locking onto mine across the lawn, a slow, deliberate smirk spreading across her face. "I finally caught myself a real one, corporate, stable, not a guy who scrubs feet for a living." A ripple of polite applause went through the crowd. My cousins exchanged knowing glances. I just stood there, my mimosa glass still in hand, watching Sadie's triumphant grin. She thought she'd landed the final blow. She thought she'd won, but she had no idea the game was about to change. Sadie's engagement announcement hung in the air, a smug, glittering declaration. Her eyes, still fixed on mine, dared me to react. But I didn't. I just took another sip of my mimosa, the bubbles tickling my nose. Let her have her moment. She had no idea what was coming. Her words, "not a guy who scrubs feet," were meant to sting, to remind me of what they perceived as my lowly station. But they just echoed a familiar refrain, one I'd heard my entire life. It took me back, right back to the beginning. When I was 18, fresh out of high school, Jacqueline, then 20, had cornered me at a family dinner. "So, beauty school, Athena? Really? Don't you think that's a bit beneath you? I mean, I'm going to law school." "Mia's looking at pre-med. You're just choosing to be trash." Her words had hit hard, sharp, and dismissive. My parents, bless their hearts, had always encouraged me to follow my passion, but they hadn't understood the depth of the family's disdain. They just thought I was being creative, but I knew what I wanted. I wanted to build something. So, while my cousins were cramming for LSATs and MCATs, I was waking up at 5 a.m. before the sun even thought about rising over the Pacific. I hauled supplies, cleaned floors, answered phones, and, yes, I painted toes. I learned every single aspect of the business. My hands were often raw, my back ached, and my eyes burned from the fumes, but I loved it. I loved the feeling of creating something beautiful, of making someone feel good about themselves. I remembered the first hostile client, a woman who screamed at me because her gel polish chipped after she'd clearly picked at it. I remembered the late nights hunched over ledgers, teaching myself accounting and marketing. I remembered the sheer terror and exhilaration of signing the papers for my first salon, a tiny spot in a strip mall that cost every penny of the small business grant I'd managed to secure, plus years of savings from working part-time jobs since I was 16. My cousins were getting allowances and new cars. I was calculating profit margins and negotiating leases. They saw the nail girl. They didn't see the grit, the sleepless nights, the relentless drive. They didn't see me handling hostile clients with a smile, or charming investors into believing in my vision. They didn't see me buying my second salon, then my third, each one bigger, more luxurious, catering to a clientele they could only dream of accessing. They just saw the acetone. Back in the present, Sadie was still basking in her glory, accepting congratulations from various aunts and uncles. I drifted towards the edge of the patio, pretending to admire Aunt Sophia's prize-winning hydrangeas. That's when I overheard my Uncle Robert, 55, a stockbroker who always seemed to be losing money but still talked like he was king of the world, talking to Uncle David, 58, a retired dentist. Still can't believe Athena went into that beauty thing, Uncle Robert chuckled, loud enough for me to hear. Such a shame. Bright girl, she could have done something with her life. Like Charlotte, at least she's in real estate. Uncle David nodded, swirling his whiskey. Yeah, well, let's hope she gets a husband, or she's going to crash at Charlotte's forever. Can't exactly retire on manicures, can you? He laughed, a dry, humourless sound. The casual dismissal, the assumption that my entire future hinged on finding a man to save me, was infuriating. It was always about what I didn't have, what I couldn't do, never what I had built. They never saw me as a self-made woman. They saw me as a charity case waiting for a husband. Just as the familiar knot of frustration tightened in my chest, my phone buzzed again. Lucas. My heart rate picked up. I discreetly checked the screen. 15 minutes away. Got what I needed. A small private smile touched my lips. Got what I needed. That was our code. It meant he had the ring, and he was ready. My palms suddenly felt a little sweaty. This was really happening. Today, at this reunion. I tucked my phone back into my clutch, trying to appear nonchalant. The air around me suddenly felt charged, electric. The universe, it seemed, was about to balance the scales. Just then my phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from my salon manager, Maya. She usually only messaged me for emergencies or important updates. I opened it, my brow furrowing slightly. It was a screenshot of an email, a job application. My eyes scanned the text, and then they widened. The applicant's name, bolded at the top, hit me like a splash of cold water. Applicant Chase Howard, position applied for, room attendant, Holland Hotels, Beverly Hills. My breath hitched. Sadie's fiancé, the corporate stable man she'd just gloated about. He was applying for a housekeeping job at Lucas's family's hotel. The irony was so thick, I could almost taste it. This wasn't just karma. It was a 5-star, full-service, luxury karma package. The family reunion was in full swing, a cacophony of polite chatter and the clinking of ice in glasses. I was still reeling from the screenshot of Chase Howard's job application, the irony of it a bitter, delicious taste in my mouth. Sadie, 29, was still holding court, her engagement ring flashing, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface of my calm exterior. My uncle's dismissive comments about my future still echoed in my ears. Can't exactly retire on manicures, can you? Then a hush fell over the crowd. Not a complete silence, but a noticeable dip in the background noise. Heads began to turn, subtly at first, then more overtly, towards the main entrance of Aunt Sophia's sprawling backyard. My heart gave a little lurch. This was it. Lucas, 30, stood there, framed by the archway, looking like he'd stepped straight out of a magazine. He was impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored dark suit, the kind that fits so perfectly it looked like a second skin. His presence was quiet, but powerful, drawing eyes without him even trying. He wasn't flashy, never had been, but the aura of old money, of undeniable presence, clung to him. I hadn't told anyone I was dating him. Not a single soul in my extended family knew about Lucas Holland. For 2 years, he had been my secret, my safe harbour away from their judgment. Now he was here, walking towards me, and the air crackled with unspoken questions. My cousins, Sadie, Mia, and Jacqueline, who had been mid-conversation by the pool, their heads bent in conspiratorial whispers, froze. Their eyes, along with everyone else's, followed Lucas as he navigated the crowd with an easy, confident stride. I saw Sadie's mouth drop open slightly, her eyes narrowing as she tried to place him. Mia, 27, stopped mid-selfie, her phone lowering slowly. Jacqueline, 30, actually paused with a half-chewed piece of fruit in her mouth. He reached me, his eyes warm and focused only on me. He didn't even glance at the stunned faces around us. He simply smiled, a genuine, soft smile that always made me feel like the only person in the room. He reached for my hand, his touch firm and reassuring. Then he did it. He dropped to one knee. The collective gasp that rippled through the backyard was almost comical. It wasn't a polite murmur, it was a visceral, shocked intake of breath. The clinking of glasses stopped. Conversations died. Every single eye was on us. Lucas looked up at me, his eyes sparkling with a mix of love and mischief. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He flipped it open, and under the high Southern California sun, the diamond inside glinted like a captured star. It was enormous, perfectly cut, and utterly breathtaking. "Athena Summers," he said, his voice clear and steady, carrying just enough to be heard by those closest to us. "You are the most incredible, brilliant, and hard-working woman I have ever known. You inspire me every single day. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" My own breath caught in my throat. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was a mix of overwhelming emotion and, yes, a tiny, delicious surge of triumph. I looked at Lucas, his earnest face, and then I instinctively glanced past him. Sadie was visibly shaking, her face a mask of disbelief. Her mouth was still open, but no sound came out. Mia looked like she'd just seen a ghost, her carefully curated influencer facade crumbling. Jacqueline's jaw was practically on the ground. Aunt Sophia, 50, looked utterly bewildered, her usual composed expression shattered. Then the murmurs started, louder this time. "Wait! Holland?" someone whispered, the name carrying like a ripple through the stunned silence. "As in the Holland hotels." Another voice closer to me muttered, laced with dawning realization. "No way!" I just looked at Lucas, tears pricking at my eyes. "Yes," I managed, my voice a little shaky but firm. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He grinned, slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, and stood up, pulling me into a tight hug. The applause, when it finally came, was hesitant at first, then swelled into a genuine roar. People started moving towards us, a wave of congratulations and stunned curiosity. Lucas pulled back slightly, still holding my hand. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles, and then he added, his voice just loud enough for all the still, shocked faces around us to hear, especially the ones belonging to my cousins. "And to think I met you at your own business. 6 salons, right?" The air in Aunt Sophia's backyard, which moments ago had been thick with judgment and the scent of money, now crackled with something else entirely. Shock, followed by a frantic scramble for proximity. Lucas's last words, 6 salons, right, had landed like a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing the carefully constructed narrative my family had held about me for years. The collective gasp turned into a flurry of movement. My cousins, who had been frozen in various states of disbelief, suddenly sprang to life. Their fake smiles, usually reserved for networking events, were now plastered on their faces, aimed squarely at Lucas. "Lucas, what a pleasure!" Uncle Robert, 55, was the first to reach us, practically shoving aside a distant cousin. "Robert Martin, I'm Athena's uncle, so glad to finally meet you." He pumped Lucas's hand vigorously, his eyes darting from Lucas to my new ring. Aunt Sophia, 50, recovered quickly, her expression shifting from bewilderment to an almost frantic cordiality. "Lucas, darling, welcome to the family. Why didn't Athena tell us about you?" She gave me a look that was a mix of reproach and sudden, intense interest. Before I could answer, Mia, 27, was there, practically elbowing Aunt Sophia aside. "Lucas, I'm Mia, Athena's cousin. I'm an influencer, social media. I'd love to connect. I have so many ideas for collaborations with Holland Hotels. She practically shoved a business card, probably one she'd printed herself, into his hand. Lucas took it politely, his expression unreadable. Jacqueline, 30, was right behind her, James, her overworked junior attorney husband, trailing awkwardly. "Lucas, Jacqueline Dixon, my husband, James. We're in law. Perhaps we could offer some legal counsel." Holland Hotels must have so many complex contracts. She gave me a saccharine smile, a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm that had just opened between us. They swarmed him, ignoring me entirely, as if I were merely a prop in this unexpected drama. They asked about his family, his background, the future of Holland Hotels. They offered business cards, unsolicited advice, and thinly veiled attempts to secure future favours. Lucas handled it all with a quiet grace, his answers polite but brief, his attention always subtly drifting back to me. He kept his arm around my waist, a silent anchor in the swirling chaos. Sadie, 29, however, wasn't part of the swarm. She stood a few feet back, her face pale, her engagement ring suddenly looking less impressive. Her eyes were fixed on me, a mixture of anger and raw, unadulterated shock. As the crowd around Lucas swelled, she finally dragged me aside, pulling me towards a quieter corner near the pool. "Wait, how long have you known him?" she hissed, her voice low and furious. "Why didn't you say anything? 2 years? You've been with Holland for 2 years and you didn't tell anyone?" I met her gaze, my expression calm. "Long enough," I said simply, echoing her own dismissive words from earlier. "And why would I?" "You all made your opinions of my life choices pretty clear." Her jaw tightened. This is insane. You let us talk about you like that." "Did I?" I raised an eyebrow. "Or did you just assume?" Before she could respond, Lucas, having gracefully extricated himself from the immediate throng, walked over, his arm still around my waist. He gave Sadie a polite, distant nod. "Everything all right here, Athena?" he asked, his voice casual. Then, as if remembering something inconsequential, he added, "Oh, by the way, we just received an application from Chase Howard for a room attendant position at our Beverly Hills hotel. Do you know him?" Sadie froze. Her eyes, already wide with shock, now looked like saucers. The colour drained from her face, leaving her looking utterly ghastly. Chase, her corporate stable fiancé, had applied for a housekeeping job. And Lucas, the heir to the Holland Hotels, knew about it. The information hit her like a physical blow. She stammered, Chase? A room attendant? No, that's impossible. He's corporate. He works in finance." Her voice trailed off, a desperate, pathetic whisper. Lucas just gave a slight, polite shrug. "Well, that's what the application stated, unless there's another Chase Howard who's applying for hotel staff positions." He smiled faintly, a hint of something unreadable in his eyes. Sadie looked from Lucas to me, her face a mixture of horror and dawning realization. The carefully constructed image of her perfect corporate fiancé had just shattered into a million pieces. The announcement for dinner cut through the sudden, tense silence. Everyone began to move towards the long, beautifully set table. I walked with Lucas, his hand in mine, feeling the stares and whispers follow us. As we all took our seats, Mia, ever the opportunist, raised her glass, a forced, brittle smile on her face. Her eyes, however, were cold and calculating as they met mine. "A toast," she announced, her voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. "To Athena and Lucas." "And to women who stayed in their lane and somehow veered into traffic." Mia's toast, "To women who stayed in their lane and somehow veered into traffic," hung in the air, a thinly veiled jab at my unexpected engagement. The underlying message was clear. I had somehow cheated, manipulated, or simply gotten lucky. It couldn't possibly be that I had earned my success, or that a man like Lucas, 30, would genuinely choose me, Athena Summers, 28, the nail girl. I just smiled, clinked my glass against Lucas's, and took a sip. Let them think what they wanted. For years I had held back, bit my tongue, hid my success to stay relatable to this family, to avoid rocking the boat, to prevent the very accusations now being thrown my way. I'd downplayed my salons, never mentioned the high-end clientele, never even hinted at the true scale of my business. When they asked, still doing nails? I'd just nod and say, yep, keeping busy. It was easier than explaining, easier than defending, easier than facing their inevitable skepticism and judgment. I had wanted their acceptance, even a sliver of it, but it had come at the cost of my true self. Now, looking at Lucas, who simply squeezed my hand under the table, I realized how much energy I'd wasted trying to fit into their tiny, suffocating box. The relief of finally being seen, truly seen, by him, was immense. After dinner, as the party began to wind down, Charlotte, 35, found me by the dessert table. Her eyes were wide with a mix of awe and genuine pride. "Athena," she began, her voice quiet, I had no idea. Lucas is incredible. And 6 salons. Why didn't you ever tell me the full extent of it? I sighed, a little tired. You know how it is, Char. Every time I tried to talk about my business, it was met with a lecture about real careers or finding a husband. It just got exhausting. You were the only one who didn't judge, so I kept it simple. Charlotte reached out and squeezed my arm. I'm so incredibly proud of you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You built an empire from nothing. And you did it all while they were busy talking about you. If you ever need anything, for your next location or anything at all, please let me know. I want to invest. Seriously. Her words were a balm, a quiet affirmation that meant more than all the shocked gasps and fake smiles combined. Thanks, Shah, I said, genuinely touched. I'll keep that in mind. The rest of the evening was a blur of forced congratulations and awkward attempts at conversation. My phone, however, was not quiet. Later that night, after Lucas and I had finally escaped Aunt Sophia's estate, my phone rang. It was James, Jacqueline's husband. Athena, he began, his voice strained and overly familiar. Congratulations. Amazing news about Lucas. Listen, I was thinking, with the Holland name and your expertise, maybe we could talk. I've been looking into some startup salon concepts, on the ground floor of a new development. Maybe you could get me in touch with Lucas. Or, just give me some pointers. I paused, picturing Jacqueline, 30, lightly hovering over his shoulder, prompting him. James, I said, my voice polite but firm. I'm flattered, but I'm not in the business of setting up my family members with start-up salons. I built my business from the ground up with years of hard work. And Lucas's family business is hotels, not beauty start-ups. I could almost hear his disappointment on the other end. Good luck with your ventures, though, I added, then hung up before he could argue. The next morning my phone was blowing up. Mia, 27, had apparently decided to leverage my engagement for her influencer career. She had posted a dozen selfies from the reunion, all featuring me and Lucas in the background, carefully cropped to make it look like we were close. The captions were nauseating. Ahcha, power couples, family goals, Holland hotels, entrepreneur life. I rolled my eyes, then blocked her. It was a small, satisfying act of rebellion. Lucas, meanwhile, was amused by the sudden flurry of attention. We were having breakfast on his patio overlooking the ocean, a stark contrast to the previous day's family drama. "You know," he said, stirring his coffee, "my HR department just sent me an interesting email. It seems Sadie emailed them this morning, begging them to reconsider Chase's position. Apparently she's quite upset about his application." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what did HR say?" Lucas took a sip of coffee, a faint smile playing on his lips. "They replied politely, of course, informed her that the room attendant position was already filled yesterday afternoon. They wished Chase the best in his job search. The news landed like a perfectly executed punch. Sadie, 29, had tried to intervene, to save face, to pull strings she didn't have. But it was too late. The position had already gone to someone else. The game was rigged, all right, but not in the way she thought. I had built my own board, and I was playing by my own rules. The day after the reunion, the air was thick with unspoken tension, even over the phone. My phone, which had been buzzing non-stop with texts and calls from family members I hadn't heard from in years, finally fell silent. They were processing, or more accurately, they were strategizing. I decided it was time to clear the air, not for their benefit, but for mine. I was tired of their assumptions, tired of their narratives. Lucas, 30, had gone back to work, but not before telling me, "Whatever you need, I'm here." Charlotte, 35, had already texted me, "Thinking of you. Don't let them get to you." I started with Aunt Sophia, 50, the family matriarch, who called me mid-morning. Her voice, usually so composed, was laced with a brittle edge. "Athena," she began, "I must say I'm quite disappointed. Why did you keep this from us? Your engagement, your business. Why the secrecy?" "Secrecy, Aunt Sophia?" I asked, my voice calm, almost detached. "Or was it just my loud silence? For years I listened to you and everyone else belittle my career choice. You called it low class, a hobby. You implied I'd never amount to anything, never find a real man. Would it have mattered if I'd told you I owned 6 salons? Would it have changed your minds about me?" "You made up your minds long ago." There was a long pause on the other end. "But Lucas Holland," she finally stammered. "Such a prestigious family. We could have celebrated you properly." "You could have," I agreed, "if you had bothered to see me for who I was, not who you wanted me to be." I ended the call politely, feeling a strange sense of liberation. Next was Jacqueline, 30, who cornered me at a coffee shop I frequented near my flagship Salon. She looked dishevelled, her usual polished facade cracked. "Athena," she pleaded, her voice a low whisper, "you have to understand. We were just looking out for you. We just wanted you to have a good life, a stable life." "A stable life like James's junior attorney salary?" I countered, my voice flat. "Or a stable life like the one I built for myself, working 16-hour days, investing every penny, and building 6 successful businesses? You called me trash for choosing beauty school. You mocked me for smelling like acetone. What exactly were you looking out for?" She flinched. "That was years ago. People change." "Do they?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Or do they just change their tune when a Holland is involved?" I left her sitting there, her coffee untouched. Mia, 27, tried a different tactic. She showed up at my salon, unannounced, acting like we were the best of friends. "Athena, girl, so happy for you. I was thinking we should totally do a collab. My followers would love to see your amazing salons, and then we could do a joint post about your engagement." She pulled out her phone, ready to snap a selfie. I looked at her, my expression unmoving. "Mia," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "my salons are by appointment only, and my life is not a backdrop for your social media. You're blocked, by the way." Her mouth dropped open, her phone lowering slowly. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing awkwardly in my reception area. The biggest confrontation, however, came from Sadie, 29. She called me, her voice a raw, angry sob. "You planned this, didn't you?" she accused, her words slurring. "This was all a revenge plot. You let us make fools of ourselves. You let us think Chase was some big shot, and then you just dropped that bomb." "No, Sadie," I said, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "I didn't plan anything. I was just living. You and the rest of the family were too busy judging me to notice. And as for Chase," I paused, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. "I didn't drop a bomb. Lucas simply mentioned an application. The truth about Chase's job situation was always there. You just chose to believe your own narrative." She broke down completely then, sobbing uncontrollably. "You're ruining everything, my engagement, my life." "No, Sadie," I corrected her gently. "You're doing that all by yourself." Just then, Lucas texted me. It was a screenshot of the final employee email from HR, officially rejecting Chase Howard's application. "Just so you know," the message read. I looked at it, then back at my phone. I didn't need to comment further. The universe had delivered its own message. Later that week, I was back at Aunt Sophia's for a follow-up family dinner, a tense affair arranged by Sophia herself, ostensibly to mend fences. As dessert was served, I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of elegant, minimalist wedding invitations. The design was simple, chic, and very me. I walked over to Charlotte, who was sitting quietly, observing the strained interactions. I handed her an invitation. "Limited space," I murmured, a private joke between us. "Appointments only." Charlotte's eyes widened slightly. Then a knowing smile touched her lips. She understood. I didn't hand out any more invitations. Not to Sophia, who watched me with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Not to Jacqueline, who was trying desperately to catch my eye. And certainly not to Sadie or Mia, who were both pointedly avoiding my gaze. I walked away from the backyard, my heels clicking purposefully on the flagstone path, leaving the strained silence and unspoken questions behind me. As I reached my car, I could hear the cousins erupting in chaos behind me, their whispers turning into angry, frustrated shouts. The show was over, and I had just closed the curtain. My wedding to Lucas was small and elegant, exactly what I wanted. We exchanged vows overlooking the ocean, with just a handful of close friends and family present. Charlotte, 35, stood by my side, her smile genuine and full of pride. Lucas's family, warm and welcoming, made me feel like I'd always belonged. Uncle Lamar from my mother's side didn't come. Neither did Sadie, 30, or Mia, 28, or Jacqueline, 31. Their absence was noted, but not mourned. It just confirmed what I already knew: some bridges are meant to be burned. It's been a year since that chaotic family reunion. A year since Lucas, then 30, proposed and inadvertently exposed the cracks in my cousins' carefully constructed lives. A lot has changed. My salon chain, which was at 6 locations then, has expanded to 8. The demand for high-end, personalised beauty services is booming, and my team is incredible. I'm no longer just the nail girl. I'm a recognised entrepreneur, even featured in a few business magazines. Ironically, the same magazines my cousins probably subscribe to. Lucas, now 31, and I have settled into a comfortable rhythm, balancing our demanding careers with a life that feels genuinely ours, free from the constant need for external validation. Mia, now 28, is deep into MLMs. Her social media feed is a relentless stream of boss babe motivational quotes and photos of questionable health supplements. She still tries to tag me in posts sometimes, but my block list is extensive. She's constantly pushing her products on anyone who will listen, and from what Charlotte tells me, she's even deeper in debt than before. The influencer dream, it seems, didn't quite pan out. Jacqueline, now 31, divorced James. Turns out his junior attorney status wasn't enough to sustain her lavish lifestyle, especially once the illusion of his partner potential faded. She's living back with her parents, complaining about the lack of eligible bachelors in her social circle. The irony of her telling me to get a husband to secure my future is not lost on me. And Sadie, now 30. Her engagement to Chase ended predictably. He apparently couldn't handle the pressure of her expectations, especially after the Holland Hotel's application fiasco. She moved back home too, her once smug demeanour replaced by a perpetual scowl. She's been quiet, off the family radar for the most part. This morning I walked into my flagship salon on Rodeo Drive, the one that started it all. The scent of lavender and expensive polish filled the air, a far cry from the acetone smell my cousins used to mock. The place was bustling, every station full, the hum of happy clients and busy technicians, a comforting symphony. I was heading to my office, checking the appointment book on my tablet, when I spotted a familiar face in the waiting area. She was sitting quietly, almost hunched, her gaze fixed on the floor. Her hair was a little duller, her clothes less sharp than I remembered. She looked tired. It was Sadie. She was waiting, without an appointment. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. There was no surge of anger, no desire for a grand confrontation. Just a quiet, almost detached observation. Karma, it seemed, had a standing appointment. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker of recognition, then a flash of shame, quickly followed by something that looked like desperate hope. I looked down at my tablet, my smile polished, professional. My voice was steady, clear, carrying just enough to reach her over the gentle hum of the salon. "Sorry, sweetie, appointment only."